Right. Jess, do we want to give it another minute or do you want to get started?
Usually every time someone asks me that, I feel like compelled to give that one more minute. So let's just say 2:03, whether, oh, it just turned 2:03. Let's hold off another minute. Just in case. It always feels like, well, will someone to come to the meeting? I hope everyone's doing well. Feels like we're having like this back and forth spring, summer, rainy weather. At least in Fresno, that's what's on the forecast. I'm assuming it's similar up in the Stockton area. I think we're expecting rain tomorrow and Friday from what I saw, but yeah. I've shared with a few of you, I had a raincoat on when we had our rain on last Monday, and that didn't really come to so. All right, 2:04. That was like actually exactly a minute. So I think we're good, Taylor. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, thanks everyone for being here, and Stephanie for putting the agenda in the chat. So, as many of you have already seen or will see in the agenda, we are lucky enough to have Les Sweiser from California New Car Dealers Association with us, and Bruce Peters and Crystal. I'm sorry, I missed your last name. And you're on mute.
Crystal Braddock.
To join us. And they're from Tracy Mazda Advantage. So to talk a little bit about the skills that dealerships locally are hiring for, to help us guide our decision making for the subcommittee around EV mechanics training. So give some context about like how we all got here, because it's been a while since we have been together. But essentially in our kickoff meeting in February, we were identifying kind of like 3 different steps of a pipeline for EV mechanics to enter the workforce. So like this kind of like very introductory step that essentially getting people's foot in the door, learning about some very basics that primes them for training such as that of Delta colleges, where you actually pursue like certifications, and they have an AA program there. And basically like the next step within like job training for EV mechanics. And then the third, like basically the end of that pipeline, essentially being job placement. So we did some like information gathering with Valley Can, with Delta College, and this is the natural next step, I think, for continuing that information hunt. So we wanted to hear, at the most basic level, like if we want to be structuring EV mechanics training, what should we be structuring around? It's probably the things that people are hiring for. Bruce and Crystal and Les have all offered their time to share with us what that looks like on the ground right now, maybe what that looks like down the road as well, especially since we're in such like an emerging industry that we're talking about, and how that can evolve over time, and maybe get a sense of what that looks like. So really today is all about just like asking lots of questions to help us understand like, what should an EV mechanic look like when they land in a dealership such as Bruce's and Crystal's, or in dealerships across the county that Les might be able to speak to at a more global level. So that's broadly the context of what we're in the room for. And Jess, if you want to provide any other details, I welcome you to.
Yeah, I was just going to say, to kind of bring it back to and this is maybe a little bit for Les and Bruce, this is all a piece of a larger program that we have that allocates funding to a variety of different measures. And so as a lot of you who are on the CSC know, there is an allocated set of funding for this. And like Taylor just described, we're still sort of in the informational gathering stage, so we understand where to best kind of direct that funding. So today is definitely not about, okay, how are we getting this measure done, so much as like, okay, what's the end goal, or how is this measure even going to be kind of used at its end stage in the Stockton community. And that's really, okay, where are we placing folks? So I think it's just important to keep that in mind and keep an open mind when asking these questions. We spoke a little bit with Les and Bruce ahead of this, and definitely I think have different perspectives on kind of where they're personally at with EV mechanics. And I think it's going to help us understand maybe the larger need moving forward. So we're really excited. And thanks, Taylor, as always, and Ed for being such great co-leads in this process and getting what I think is going to be just a really interesting meeting set up.
Thanks, Jess. Ed, anything to add before we get into it?
No, I'm just very thankful that there's this much interest, and look forward to getting a program developed that becomes a feeder for our dealerships that have needs for electric vehicle mechanics. So thank you.
Great. All right, well then let's go ahead and just do some introductions. So Les and Bruce and Crystal, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourselves before we hop into it?
Sure, happy to. So my name is Les Swizer. I'm staff counsel at California New Car Dealers Association. We're a trade organization that represents somewhere between 1,200 and 1,300 new car dealers here in the state of California. Before becoming an attorney for CNCDA, I was an automotive tech. So this issue is actually pretty near and dear to my heart, and just happy to be here. Happy to have the opportunity to sort of give a real world, boots on the ground outlook for all y'all trying to advance your youth into good, sustainable, good careers. So thanks for the opportunity.
Great. My name is Bruce Peters. I'm general manager at Tracy Mazda. I've also got Crystal Braddock, our service manager, with me here as well. I've got 34 years of background in the automotive industry, mostly in the parts and service side of it. So just the last 2 years, I've become the general manager. So fixed operations and technicians are what most of my career has been dealing with. And with Mazda being new in the electrified vehicle market, it's interesting to us, and we want to learn and grow with the program. Is the reason we're here, and want to try and help spur that along.
Excellent, thanks, Bruce. Crystal?
Hi, I'm Crystal. I'm the service manager here at Tracy Mazda. I've been the manager for about 2 years here. Previous to that, I was a service advisor for about 9. So I'm a little bit new to the EV game, hiring technicians for EV and all that kind of stuff. I'm a little bit new to it, so it'll be good for me to just learn all of that as well. So.
Well, thank you all again so much for being here. And again, yeah, a lot of this is really geared at just filling our information gaps. We're not technicians here, so you'll have to treat us with soft hands. But just to get right into it, I think some of the one of those basic questions, and I encourage everybody else on the call to feel free to raise their hands and ask questions as well. But I just most simply, are most of your hires for EV technicians experienced mechanics coming into it, or are they people new to the field? And what does experience mean when you're bringing people on into the role?
Well, currently, as I mentioned, we're new. Mazda has just launched its first EV in this last year, and California is the only state that has the new Mazda EVs at this point. It'll be launched nationwide next year. So we currently have just had some of our existing technicians train for it. But as this grows, we're going to be needing to add technicians, and we'll be looking to hire new incoming technicians, as this will be a big part of our market here. And at most the next 10 years, probably sooner than that we'll be needing to add a lot more technicians. And as Les had kind of mentioned at our pre-meeting, technician shortages are huge right now. And that's what I think a lot of this needs to direct towards, starting at the high school level and getting technicians are getting young people interested in going to more of a trade tech type school to want to be a technician versus a four-year college. They're not putting down four-year colleges anyway, but we're not looking for an AA or a BA degree to hire a technician. We're looking for somebody who's got a little bit of hands-on experience. And, you know, we're willing to, as a dealership, along with the manufacturer's training and potentially supplementing with local community colleges or even the high schools, you know, doing training to get them started in that field, and then we can do the individual manufacturer training at the dealership level.
Bruce, I was going to ask, how deep does that individual training go? I know of other dealers that actually have programs where an entry-level mechanic can come into the facility and take specialized units that will increase his pay ultimately and give him more knowledge as he grows as a mechanic technician. Does Mazda have a program like that?
Mazda specifically as a manufacturer is working on a program like that that I'm aware of, but they don't currently have it going. I believe they've just recently launched it in the Northeast, and we as a dealership, though, that's where a lot of our journeymen and senior technicians have come from. They started, or even potentially even just working in our car wash bay, and moved them into a loop tech position, and then started that training and worked their way up into that. And that's been some of our best hires, and get the loyalty by showing them the recognition of the chance of advancement.
So Taylor, can I ask, this is Margot Prowse. I'm a resident in the area on this committee. And so are you saying that most of the training is in the Northeast? Where are your mechanics getting their training from the dealer?
Well, what I was meaning by that, and I apologize, I wasn't more clear, the Mazda corporate, Mazda North America, is starting a pilot program in the Northeast with some of the Northeast dealers to train and bring along technicians in that area. That's not where we're getting technicians from. I've tried it many years in the past of getting technicians to relocate through different tech schools and things. Unfortunately, that rarely has worked out, at least in my case, especially coming to California. People moving here are very overwhelmed by the expenses and everything else of living in California. So we want to get local young people involved and encourage them to look towards a technician career. The technician career has drastically changed. It used to kind of be the image of rebuilding engines and being dirty and greasy all day long, where especially with electric vehicles, it's a very clean work environment, and you want it as clean as possible, and you're not getting dirty and lifting heavy parts and doing heavy duty work. It's more electrical diagnosis and parts exchanges, which are relatively clean. So it's the stigma of a technician, I think, has drastically changed, and that might not be getting out to the younger people that would potentially be interested in this field.
So you mentioned a lot of your folks are like starting off, like they come to you super entry level, even like working in the car wash bay or something like that. Is that's a fairly typical way that people like move through like their professional development as like mechanics, is like they just come in as like young folks, maybe like high school grads, and train up at your site?
That's been successful for us. Some of the bigger manufacturers, Honda, Toyota, some of them do have trade schools and programs with schools like Wyotech and some of the community college. I know over in Hayward, Las Positas has a training program for technicians. So there are some that do that, just Mazda currently doesn't. So for us, that hasn't been a big push, where we've had more success promoting younger people that just kind of came to us initially just looking for a job out of high school and needing something to do. And if we've seen that they've got a little bit of talent and drive and a hard worker, we help try to encourage them to move up within our company.
This is kind of towards Les, because I know you deal with the other dealerships. Do you see a similar thing going on with some of the other dealers besides Mazda? Or do you see, like, I'm thinking of some of those, you know, to your point, Bruce, Mazda's just coming into the market, but you've got some other folks who are kind of more mature, have a more mature trajectory. Are you seeing a similar kind of thing in terms of how people are getting into this?
You know, I think it really just kind of depends. If you've got an individual who, you know, just came out of a community college program, which was that was my trajectory when I was a tech. I went through a community college program, you get your certifications. I know that there are some dealers that I talk to that are really, really adamant. They want their new techs to have ASE certifications. Some dealers will take whoever is a live body and can hold a wrench, you know, just because there is such a shortage of techs. So I think that, for example, in my program, Toyota was really involved with the trainings and providing, you know, older cars for us techs to work on us that we're learning. I know that there are several manufacturers that try to get involved in community college programs with the hopes of funneling the graduates into their dealerships, you know, with a sort of lean towards their manufacturer style. It's right now, all I hear, we have at CNCDA, we have a foundation where we put forth scholarships to promising techs to try to get them interested in working for dealerships. So dealerships have put a lot of money into that program. And right now, what I hear is just desperation for techs. And there's, you know, dealers are very innovative and they're very forward-thinking folks, and they see that the EV is the avenue of the future. And currently, the statistic is something like 72% of new car buyers take their vehicle somewhere else for service to a third-party independent mechanic. We're anticipating that to reverse for electric vehicles. We're looking at potentially 90-something% of those electric vehicles coming back to the dealership, which tells us that the demand for techs is only going to get higher. So any kind of experience that someone has is going to advance them quicker, of course, just like with any profession or career. If you come in with ASE certifications and you come in with an AA and you have a little bit of practical experience, maybe you start off in the lube bay instead of the car wash bay. Maybe you start off working as an apprentice under a master tech. It just really depends on the dealership and the dealership size. It's not necessarily manufacturer specific as to how dealers hire their techs. But right now it's just anybody that can get in that has a little bit of talent with a wrench.
And one of the things that, you know, in the research that we've done, that we've discovered is that needle moves right from more traditional gas powered engines to here, that the skill set changes, right, in terms of what people are looking for. And so some of the discussions that I've been having with folks are, so what are the minimum qualifications that you want somebody to have, right? And it just so happens that, you know, a brother-in-law runs a service for Cadillac, you know, and I hear the same thing from you guys, right? Is he going to show up every day? You know, I'll teach him if he'll just come to work every day. And so that's a concern or a question I have for both of you. So are we talking, you want them to have gone through an AES or, you know, program, or to your point, it's somebody coming out of, you know, a post-secondary or whatever, or a similar small, you know, kind of let me get my feet wet. Oh my goodness, I think I might like this. And okay, I'll start in the car wash bay, right? And I want to learn this. So I guess that's I think my question is, with the labor market being such as it is are we looking at the right way to go about this, which is either A, some kind of EV boot camp, or B, because, you know, we're looking at obviously various levels of capacity, right? Not everybody, and I'm preaching to the choir, somebody may not be exceptional academically, but they might be amazing mechanically. And so what should we be thinking about as we try to look at this to build it? Should we be looking AES? I feel like that is probably overkill, but you tell us, if somebody showed up and they wanted to say, hey, I think this is what I want to do, what would you want to see them be able to do?
Well, I'll start, I guess, Les. Here again, I can only speak for our leadership group and where I've worked. Especially in today's labor market, like you were saying, it's almost, we need a warm body, someone who thinks they might have an interest in this. A lot of our interview questions that Crystal and myself ask these young people these days are, have you even changed the oil on your own car? Do you know how to do that? Do you know just the basics of a vehicle, whether they have any experience or not? But if they think it's something they would be interested in, and we can teach them, and we think they have the ability to learn, and they show interest in wanting to learn, we're going to give them a shot. We're going to hire them. We just, again, need somebody who comes to work and has the energy and drive and wants to learn, and we're gonna give them that opportunity.
Yeah, I that's been my experience talking to dealers. That's been the general attitude, is that, if they're going to show up and they're going to work hard and they want to learn, then we're going to hire them. I think that something that we should remember is that there's still a lot of components on a vehicle that on an electric vehicle that are familiar. So, there's still brakes, there's still suspension, there's still a lot of components that we're going to see that we're familiar with as techs. And, I mentioned before, and I don't remember if I was talking to Ed or Taylor, but something that kind of intrigued me is if you've got students that are already interested in going into the automotive field and they want to study it and they want to learn more about it, something that might be helpful transitionary wise for a dealer would be an individual who's working on getting an automotive education with perhaps a concentration in EV mechanics. So they're learning the basics of the ICE vehicles that are still, unfortunately, going to be around for quite a while. Even as we ban the sale of new ICE vehicles, we're still going to have, and that's internal combustion engine. I'm sure you're all familiar, but I'm sorry for using the abbreviation. But we're still going to have those around, and they're still going to come into dealerships. So we still need people who are going to be capable of handling those cars, as well as people who can transition into that EV role. And perhaps they have that specialty, that they are automotive tech with an EV specialty, and they can still work on moving their way up through the ranks. And then when the EV transition starts to become more solidified, they're ready to go. So that was just a thought that I had as far as a program that might be beneficial for the transition for both techs and dealers.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of it, as I kind of briefly mentioned before, needs to start almost at the high school counselor level of showing these young people that right now, all the young people I know are interested. They want to go into coding or gaming or something to that effect, that it's electronics that they're wanting to work with. And I don't think they're thinking, or they may not be thinking about the automotive side of it, that they get to do a lot of the same type stuff, but it's in the automotive field, and they actually get to be out and in the shop and doing more. To me, and again, I'm a longtime car guy, so I'm probably a little biased, but I think trying to get more people excited about that at the early stages would be definitely beneficial.
Les, you mentioned this, I think, very important number about like or like general automotive technician shortages. You mentioned a nationwide number. I think you'd mentioned a statewide number before. Are you able to share like what growth looks like relative, or what the deficit of technicians looks like over time, what your anticipated needs are going to be around hiring across the state, and if the data is available more locally, in that, whether that's San Joaquin County or Stockton?
I don't have anything specifically into San Joaquin and Stockton. There's been a few reports that have come through since, I think this has been studied for quite a while now, but in 2020, there was a Universal Technical Institute had a sort of a plug quoting the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which is anticipating a 4% decline in employment overall in the auto tech field. through 2029. They're anticipating nationwide that there will be an average of 76,000 mechanics needed each year between 2016 and 2026. And that's both because the growth just isn't fast enough in the field. There's not enough new automotive techs coming into the field, and there's a massive amount of folks that are retiring out of the field. Traditionally, working on a vehicle has been very hard on the body, so a lot of folks don't necessarily last until they're in their 70s or 80s, like us that sit at the desk, you know. So it's just dropping a lot faster than anticipated. The number that I've got here, and I apologize, I pulled it up. So TechForce Foundation did a study and anticipated that nationally, the auto industry would be short nearly 800,000 technicians between now and 2025. So that's, needless to say, fairly significant. And it's to Bruce's point, it's because there's kind of a stigma around working on a car. And I think that the more we can educate younger people at the high school level and get them excited about the intricacies of electric vehicles specifically, I mean, just any kid that's interested in coding, I mean, there's so much coding on a vehicle now, you'd be amazed, and so much AI that's coming into vehicles now, especially as we move into the autonomous era. It's not, being a mechanic's not what it was. And I think the big push needs to be educating young folks that it's not the same anymore. It's not turning a wrench and being greasy. I remember a commercial back several decades ago for AutoZone where the guy's working on his car, he comes back, eats a sandwich, and he leaves a greasy handprint on a sandwich. Those kinds of images are just so antiquated at this point that we've got that stigma that just, this isn't accurate anymore.
I have a question for Bruce and for Les. What can a journeyman, and this isn't about, I know that it's a wag at best, a wild ass guess, but what is a journeyman technician for an internal combustion engine? Potentially, what can he make? And does that equate to what an EV mechanic could possibly make after 2 to 4 years of, in the field training or actual work?
Yeah, currently, obviously the Central Valley is a little bit lower than the Bay Area as far as wages go. We do a lot of studies on that because we want to try and, stay at least competitive in the curve to get technicians in. And currently probably average journeyman internal combustion engine technician is in the mid 30s range, in the $35 to $36 an hour range with experience here in the Central Valley. I think there's a lot left to be seen on the EV side. And that's actually an interesting and great question, is it going to require more skill set and more learning and education to be able to stay competitive in the EV side versus the skill set it takes to work on the ICE engines? That's actually a great question. And right now, I would say anybody trying to get technicians, it's going to be pretty competitive and be about the same. But is that going to change one direction or the other in the future when we go more towards the EV vehicles? I'm not sure, but I think that's something that definitely needs to be looked at.
One quick question, and this is for Crystal, who's sitting in the background being quiet. Crystal, one of the things that we're concerned about is what you need from a mechanic standpoint. Now, you deal as service manager, you're talking to these folks on a daily basis. You know what? You're like the orchestra player. You're the one that makes music with their talents. So my question is, what are the things that are most important for you to have a successful mechanic that can accomplish the tasks that you need done?
I need a mechanic, first of all, to show up. I need a body like Bruce and Les were saying earlier. Honestly, with the tech shortage, it's hard enough to just find a person, to also have expectations for that person coming in as well. But if I was able to choose, definitely a mechanic who can think on his feet, does use his resources very wisely, can work in a fast-paced environment, can multitask with a lot of different vehicles coming in, can switch from doing light work to heavy work to diagnostic work. Just somebody who is quick on their feet and can be in a very fast-paced environment, but still work efficiently.
Great.
And is willing to learn and change.
Yes, yes.
That is an elusive beast, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
So I think one of the things that a number of groups are talking about is the idea of, do you look at something like a boot camp model, or as a precursor to something like an associate's degree, right? With someplace like a Delta College or whatever. And I think one of the things, and I speak as an ex-teacher and school administrator, I think, we all suffer from some of our hubris. Another part of what I do is I oversee construction. I'm in very non-traditional female roles, and we are suffering from our own hubris of convincing young people that trades are not the way to go, when I've got tradespeople making well into six figures. And so part of what my role is at the Housing Authority is to do kind of what you're talking about, right? To reach out to our residents and our constituents and say, hey, this is an option for you. And so I think as these groups talk, we're trying to say, so is a way for somebody who might be interested. We don't know if they're interested because have you ever changed your own oil? Well, we're talking about folks who might not own a car, right? And so we have to look at life a little differently here. And so one of the things like through ValleyCan was, okay, do we do something like a crash course, right? Let's see if you might be interested, because low barrier to entry, right? You're not making a 2-year lifelong commitment, and then to see. So my question to that is, if you go in with something like that, 4 units, 8 units, whatever it is, and somebody says, wow, where have you been all my life? So if somebody were to come with you with a certificate like that, is that somebody you're willing to say, hey, here you go, we're going to start you, you're coming in at the lowest entry, but your pants are on fire. We want to, we're going to give you a shot. Because I think that's the other piece that struck me when you said that is, like I said, there may be people who don't know if they are. And that's why these little low barrier to entry kind of hors d'oeuvre options might be a good option for our people.
Right. No, you're absolutely correct. And we would love to see that. We get a lot of, I shouldn't say a lot, but we've had several employees. We've ran ads for a lube technician and things, and we get a lot of application from people who are working in the Amazon warehouse and think they might want to do this. And some of them, we recently had one that showed up and worked for a day, and we never heard or saw from him again. So it wasn't what he was expecting. So yeah, if there was some type of program like that where they could just, at least come to us and show that, yeah, we did show a little bit of interest. We did this and we're still interested. They would move to the top of a candidate list real quickly.
Okay.
Would a dealership taking an entry-level person with an EV focus that has just the open door EV information, would the dealership invest any money in Delta College or other college training on behalf of that individual if they knew that they had a hard, firm commitment?
Well, again, I can't speak for other dealers. We are actually currently looking at multiple programs like that to try and recruit technicians. As Les said, it's extremely hard to find them right now, and a lot of them are retiring and going out of the industry. So we need a lot of them right now. we are willing to pay for any technician that is working for us that goes to school. We will pay for their training while they go to school. We're doing tool purchase programs where we buy entire toolboxes with the full set of tools and everything for them, and they kind of rent to own those toolboxes. If they work for us a certain amount of time, they own that toolbox, and they never had to invest in paying any money towards that toolbox. There's a lot of ideas and things out there that we're open to and trying to get new young talent into this industry.
That's huge, Bruce. That's I remember buying my tools. I think I might still have a couple of debts to the Snap-on man. You know, those things are not cheap. And as it gets more and more specialized, I imagine it's going to get more and more expensive. So the more dealers are doing this, I applaud you on that.
Yeah, me too. My first trade was heavy equipment mechanic, and I easily have $100,000 worth of tools, easily. And where were you when I was 20 years old?
No, we're not buying the $100,000 toolbox, but we're getting them the tools they need to do the job.
Do those tools look substantially different for like EV techs? Like
they are, and the manufacturers recently, supplied us, and as I said, Mazda's just new into this game, but there was a fairly substantial investment the dealer had to make for the tools required to be able to work on them. And so we have a set of dealership tools, but obviously each technician has their own day-to-day tools they use. But the specialty tools involved, the dealer, we just made a fairly large investment into having all that equipment to be able to diagnose and work on them properly.
Are the tools standardized? I mean, you know how all the high-tech things now, everybody has their own way of doing things and their own. Once they receive these tools, can they go to another dealer if they'd like to, or another option, or do you know?
A lot of them are. The ones that the dealer purchases from the manufacturer, those are probably a little more specialized to that manufacturer, but a lot of them are interchangeable. From what I'm seeing right now, most all manufacturers, as far as they're communicating in some ways to try and make it standardized to a degree. Everybody has the same type of plug-in and charging systems, with the exception of Tesla right now that has their own, where every other manufacturer, their plugins will work at another manufacturer. So a lot of it is standardized, but not everything.
Again, Leslie, you said something earlier that I kind of wanted to follow up on, which was the number of people coming back to the dealerships to service their vehicles is having a profound turn in an anticipated turn of people have to go back to the dealerships because y'all are the ones who are equipped to do the service technician rather than a third party. How do you balance that with, and I'm building an assumption into this, so challenge it if you need to, that EVs tend to take a lot less maintenance than ICEs. So is that end up balancing out? Does it, like, I'm just curious, like what types of services people come in for and how frequently and what the nature of those would be?
Sure, absolutely. I'm happy to answer that. So it's fairly general misconception. Early on, EVs are going to be less for maintenance, but as time goes on, there's been actually several studies that have shown that over 3-year, 5-year, 10-year period, the cost to maintain your EV is pretty in parity with the cost to maintain an ICE vehicle. So initially it's not a ton, but having that return business is more to a dealer than just getting the service money. It's more about building that relationship with their customers. If you sell a car to a customer and they come back for service and you take good care of them, when it's time for them to get another car, they're going to remember you. They're going to come back to you. And that's the goal of good service in a dealership. Yes, it is a good profit center. Yes, these are still businesses that they are running to make profit, but they're more focused on, it's more customer centric focus. which is why there's such high standards. And Bruce could probably attest to this. Many manufacturers put pretty high standards on dealers as far as customer service satisfaction in the service drive, not just in the sales department. So while initially you'll have maybe a little less income in the repair side of an EV, over time it's going to come into parity with an ICE vehicle.
I noticed, Mr. Ambrose, you've had your hand up patiently for a while. Do you have a question?
Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name's Andrea Ambrose. I'm at CARB, and I just am such a fan, and I can't help but be engaged in the conversation since I'm here. Just to introduce myself, I have been working on EVs, researching EVs for more than a dozen years. I grew up off the grid. I built solar powered crud when I was 6 years old. I love this stuff, and I'm super interested and very hands-on. I also had a 71 Datsun 240Z I rebuilt in high school. So those are my bona fides. Okay, everybody. So I just want to throw this out there, though, that we are kind of confounding, it sounds like, two sort of things. One, the kind of immediate needs of folks in the community to identify opportunities for high-paying, awesome jobs that employ them and provide them growth, and also this kind of forward-looking idea of what are the needs of a fully electric vehicle fleet. And I want to go back just to this point we just raised about the differences in maintenance patterns between electric vehicles and conventional vehicles. If you look at the standard reasons that a conventional vehicle comes back to a mechanic or a dealership, it's primarily for service of fluids, which often identifies other mechanical issues, right? If we look at the primary reasons that electric vehicles, and of course, electric vehicles haven't been out that long, right? We started selling the Nissan Leaf in 2012. It's only been 10 years. So a 10-year cost ownership comparison is almost crazy to even think about when those vehicles haven't been on the road that long. So the reason EVs tend to come back to dealerships, mechanics, and other is actually for a couple of reasons. One of the most common is actually wiper blades and window repairs, but really the major mechanical issues which folks tend to have are related to the battery or sensors on the vehicle. And so primarily it's battery voltage issues and sensor issues, and also related to the charging system. And this is just the data that we see from the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration, as well from the Transportation Research Board. And happy to provide resources for those folks that like to dig into the data a little deeper. And I just want to highlight that, I think elevate some of the ideas I heard. There's a lot of existing programs at the community colleges. Various community colleges across the states have partnerships. Community colleges kind of try to think locally. They're usually really excited to engage with the local community. Having spent quite a bit of time actually teaching, I'm always excited to have an opportunity to engage students, and I think the community colleges are looking for those too. A lot of them have programs. I know you heard about some already today. And it's really important to think about how you can reduce barriers, perhaps, for those folks in the community who have a hard time accessing those programs. The first step on the ladder is often the hardest one, right? And so reducing those barriers. And when we think about, what are the skills that an EV mechanic is going to need that differentiates them from, maybe a conventional mechanic, we can think about the little bit of information that we have, that a lot of what we're going to see is digital engagement and over-the-air transfer of information to the vehicle. And a lot of it's going to be plugging it in, being able to understand a readout of various types of error codes, like an OBD, and kind of being able to do diagnostic like that in a relatively quick fashion. A lot of those skills are things that I think are really well built up at maybe a community college, or even a technical school. High school is a great place to start. So I just want to throw all that out there. And like I said, if anybody is interested in talking about EVs or EV research, feel free, please. I'll drop my email in the chat too, but please send me an email sometime.
Thank you. I have a comment, just would like to hear your opinion about this, but we've been involved with some programs that have indicated that the hardest part of entry level EV training is the ability to read and write. Are you seeing those kinds of issues in your hiring of entry-level technicians.
Was that directed at me, Ed, or?
Yeah, Bruce,
Okay, yeah.
Crystal, Les.
A little bit. That is something, especially with warranty repairs, that the technicians have to write a good diagnosis and repair procedure for us to be able to get paid a warranty claim from the manufacturer. So some of that is important. Crystal recently adopted a program that kind of does that for the technicians. It's a computer program, basically an app that they put in the basic information and it generates a proper, well thought out, well written story and has them fill in the boxes of the diagnostic codes and things. So there are companies out there that are already thinking and getting ahead of that, but that is a bit of an issue. It's always been in the old style before we went to computers of being able to read what the technician wrote on the back of the repair order that had greasy fingerprints all over it and everything else has always been a challenge. So
Yeah.
it's not completely new.
Thank you.
Jess, go ahead.
Thanks. I just wanted to, first of all, thank Hanjiro for his comments. I think he succinctly summarized like what we've been working on the past few months, which is really understanding like the broad scale from what I think Taylor keeps calling appropriately the pipeline of like how we from like interest to job placement, how do we get folks in there? And so I just wanted to kind of remind folks, I think early on, now maybe things evolved now that we've learned more, but early on a couple months ago, Taylor introduced earlier in the beginning of the meeting, but I don't think everyone was on yet, that we sent out a little survey, we had a discussion as a group, and it does really still feel like that early stage and maybe kind of getting people started is still our goal. So I'm just so excited to like hear all the conversation and still, from our perspective, still feel like I think we're on track, but definitely appreciative of Andrea's comments, which I think definitely puts into perspective like this scope and really like the big scale of what we're trying to tackle here. So I definitely can't be as passionate about it as Hanjiro was, but just thank you. And thanks all for kind of that engagement so far. And not that I'm wrapping us up. I know we have like 11 more minutes, but I just felt like it was a good time to kind of summarize because I think Hanjiro put in a good summary.
Well, and I would just say to add to your point, having been a teacher and a principal for a million years before I do what I do now, one of the things I would say, and I think I said this earlier to Bruce and Les, that my entire career and being in construction, that folks who sometimes are mechanically inclined may not be your best students in terms of how we traditionally as schools have measured that. But I've got students over the last 100 years, they can fix something, a refrigerator with their eyes closed, but don't ask them to pass their math test, right? So I think, and when we talk about low barrier to entry, that's what drives me, right? So just so you all know, and I know a lot of you are from Stockton, so and for you folks who are not, so at the Housing Authority, we've kind of foreseen this, and what we did is we have a multi-layer of entry. We were one of the places that got a ZEB grant. I don't know if you know that, and that's a training grant. And so one of the things that was absolutely adamant to me was that if somebody got the gumption to walk in and say, I need help, I want to do something, I didn't want to ever have to say no to them. Sorry, where I'm sitting in the sun. So we have a multiple places of entry. We have a partnership with the county office for something called Comeback Kids. So if someone comes to us and doesn't even have a high school diploma, they can go there and get that. The next thing is we're going to have a customer service program where people who, ultimately that's still a big deal. And then we're working on an EV charging station and install a tech. And then we've got the other EV mechanic stuff. So part of what drove that was these multiple places of entry with very low barriers to entry for some people. And so the goal we have, and the reason I was sort of picking your brain lesson and Bruce was exactly to the point where if somebody goes through this, I want to be able to say, hey, will you at least talk to this person, talk them through what it might be, because again, the average income of our residents is $19,000. So not all of them have vehicles. And that's why, partnership and AB 617 people know this, part of what we're working for is having an EV car share so people have access towards self-sufficiency, right? So I think that is a big deal, you know, when we're talking about this, that I think that's something we're really trying to address. So anyway, long story, like I said, short, that and all of my AB 617 friends, that's what we're working on to try to really bridge this gap of not, you know, making people have opportunity.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%, Sandy, and I think that's a great idea and a great program you've got going. We would love to interview people like that, and I agree 100% that most of the youth in the higher income areas and there are all already have their mindset on they're going to a 4-year school and they're not looking to do a career like this, more working with their hands. That our industry is getting less away from working with their hands, but it still is going to involve that to a high degree. But those are the kids that show interest that we think would be perfect in this field, and we would love to be a part of a program like that.
I agree, Bruce. In my career, I've hired significantly dyslexic mechanics that were just phenomenal. In fact, one of them went on to be a NASCAR mechanic. I've also hired autistic, functional on the spectrum individuals that have done outstanding work in the trades, not in the in-depth necessarily, but repetitive work they were very good at in many cases. Not to limit that to repetitive only, but I agree. There's lots of room for growth, and I like Sandy's comment about let's find a way.
Well, and while we're solving the tech shortage, let's solve that teacher shortage, shall we? Because I applaud those who have done any teaching. It's you got to have the patience of a saint, but that is something that we've had feedback from different colleges and local schools, is that not only is there a tech shortage, but there's a lack of tech teachers. You know, the hope is that folks retire out of their tech jobs and maybe go into teaching part-time in a community college, but that just doesn't seem to be happening at the rate that we had initially hoped. So let's pop that on the agenda too. Yeah.
I really appreciate Sandy's input and other people who have mentioned outreach to high school, outreach to the kids. And I just wonder, Sandy, how do you do your outreach? And is that something, Taylor and Ed, that we as a committee should be looking at including?
Good question, Margot. So the answer is yes, we're really blessed. So we have obviously very built-in folks. And for you folks who don't know, so we have got Conway, which has got, 600 units. We've got Sierra Vista. And don't forget, we also have over 6,000 housing vouchers on the street, right? So we have immediate access to over 8,000 households, like without even trying. And that's without using, so for example, you may or may not know that we had a big event at Conway, I don't know what, 3 weeks ago, where we did our EV launch, with SJCOG and all of our partners, and everybody was there to kind of, and their district was there. And it was, we used social media. So we really have built in strategies just because what we do. We have job fairs all the time. During COVID, we had a lot of, like, for example, food giveaways. So we already have an entire infrastructure built for that. So I think that's one of the things that I really feel like with the AB 617 stuff that we've really been able to bring to the table, because when we're trying to get feedback, to be able to do like a survey, right? It's so easy for us, where other people struggle how to engage folks. We've got that down. We know how to do that. So to be able to get the word out, for example, about a training program, we have the ability to flyer every single unit. We have the ability to send flyers to 6,000 households, plus the social media, plus all that other stuff. So yeah, so I think that's how we've done our outreach. I'm not saying it's the only game in town, but we sure had a lot of people at our EV, our launch thing at Conway a few weeks ago.
Margot, your question is valid, and I think we're still wandering a little bit as to how to get the best information out. Although we have Juan Carranza that's willing to personally address every envelope to everyone that lives in the AB 617 footprint. I'm pretty sure, maybe not, but
And wax seal and make it all, yes.
not to make a joke of it, we do need to find a way to communicate. And more than anything else, Taylor and I have talked about this. We really believe that some of our early direction that we've talked about is the best use of the small amount of funds that we have for this process. But we're looking for wins. We're looking for the ability to grow this thing. And it looks like we could have lots of different partners as we move forward.
Yeah, agreed. Everett, do you want to do one last question and then we can start wrapping up?
Well, hello?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yes, this is Everett Johnson. I just had a quick comment or a question. I think that I'm sorry. I'm living in the area of Airport and Worth Street. About along with the gaming industry and along with the service industry, that I'm talking about the recruits from the Army, the Navy, different people that do not make the cut, that are reasonably how the servicemen are trained to the way they're trained to work on machinery and to work on different types of new equipment that is coming out. That is another, to me, that is another place that we can to go and find people who that might can meet or help us in our endeavors.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Everett. Well, in our last minute, I'll try to synthesize real quick, but I think we got incredibly helpful information. So Bruce, Crystal, and Les, thank you so much for all of your expertise and your insights and for sharing them with us. It sounds like, Margot, to your point, to unbury the lead, that, and I think Jess, you mentioned as well, like that this really informs the getting people in the door and then like what entry level means. Bruce, especially from like what you were sharing about, you know, what training looks like once they enter your dealership, yeah, and how they grow their skills there. So I think, Ed, we can meet offline and start putting together some like revised options about what that looks like, and we'll get back to the group shortly. But again, just Bruce, Crystal, Les, thanks so much for spending your time with us and sharing.
Yeah, I also want to thank you. There's very few things in life that have the potential of lifting someone out of poverty than what the trades can provide. And I'm a true believer in that. So thank you everyone for your interests.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks for having us. Happy to be a part of it.
Good.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a great afternoon.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good evening. Be
Bye
safe.
so much, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.